Welcome to another chapter in our Central New South Wales trip. In this episode, we leave Young Showgrounds and make our way along the Olympic Highway to Cowra, where we spend the morning. From Cowra, we left the Mid-Western Highway and took the Henry Lawson Way to Grenfell, and made our camp for the night at the historic railway station. The following day, we continued our journey to Forbes, where we stayed overnight at the showgrounds, and then on to Parks before making our way along the Renshaw-McGirr Way to Wellington and on to Gulgong. Our final camp for this episode was at Wirrawa Reserve on the Castlereagh Highway between Gulgong and Dunedoo. As we made our way along the highway, the countryside was forever changing. It is interesting to see how the country is used in different areas. Situated in the Lachlan Valley, Cowra is surrounded by vineyards, waterways and pretty countryside. On the 5th of August 1944 at 1:50 a.m, over 1,000 Japanese prisoners launched a massive breakout from the Cowra prisoner of war campsite. It was the largest prisoner of war breakout in modern military history. 231 Japanese soldiers and 5 Australian soldiers lost their lives. The ruins of the prisoner of war campsite are still visible today, and Rick and I spent the morning walking around the huge site, starting with the guard tower where we listened to a detailed audio presentation that set the scene of what was to follow on that day. A 5-panel sculpture depicts silhouettes of those directly affected by the breakout: an Australian guard, a Japanese POW, an Italian POW, and an Indonesian mother and child. Well-placed interpretive signage helped us visualise what once stood in this picturesque part of Cowra. We strolled around the site, marvelling at the size of the camp, though there were still remains in the paddocks outside the site further down the hill. Cowra is steeped in history, with Federation, colonial and Victorian commercial buildings lining the town's business centre. The architecture of some of these old buildings was amazing, and included the old Federation-style courthouse, the Gothic stone St Raphael's Church, and the public school built in 1882, the town's first hotel, the old stone flour mill built in 1860, and Cowra's oldest home, Ilfracombe's House, built in 1879. We had spent the morning in Cowra, dodging showers, and now made our way along the Henry Lawson Way to Grenfell. If Cowra had some amazing historic buildings, then Grenfell was next level. Grenfell is steeped in gold rush history and bushranger legends, and was first known as Emu Creek, where miners had erected their tent, bark hut and a small business centre along the banks of the creek. Grenfell was proclaimed in 1867 in honour of John Grenfell, Gold Commissioner at Forbes, who had been killed in 1866 when bushrangers attacked a stagecoach on which he was travelling. Wheat was grown in the district in 1871. Long before gold was discovered at O'Brien's Hill in 1866, notorious bushrangers such as Ben Hall and his gang roamed the hills of Grenfell and the Cowra region. We checked out the big gold pick and pan that symbolised the gold fever that struck the regions not far from our campsite at the historic railway station. Grenfell is also the birthplace of Henry Lawson, born in 1867 on the Grenfell Goldfields, or Emu Creek as the tiny settlement was then known. Once the rain had cleared for the afternoon, we took a walk up along the street beside the railway line to the large grain storage facility and silos. The silos were built in 1925, with later additions to the northern end of the silos in 1961, and the bulkhead built in 1968. In 2018, the partners of local grain trading business Grenfell Commodities commissioned a Melbourne-based artist to transform the 4 silos. The silo artwork is a compilation of images representing the contemporary farming industry and landscape of the Weddin Shire, featuring sheep, cattle and native birds in the foreground, in a landscape adorned by the Weddin Mountains National Park. The artwork has been one of the most colourful displays we had seen on our travels. From the silos, we continued on our walk around town, marvelling at all the historic buildings. Unlike other Australian towns that are built on a simple grid system, Grenfell has a main street named Main Street which bends rather than is in a straight direction, with a second street, George Street, which is a lane that runs behind the main street shaped like an arc. From Grenfell, we made our way along the Henry Lawson Way to Forbes. Abundant in history, Forbes is full of heritage buildings and an interesting cemetery. Rick and I took a self-guided walking tour through the central business district, marvelling at the magnificent colonial architecture and heritage features of about 18 of the listed buildings, and Victoria Park, where in 1994 the then Prince Charles planted an elm tree. Many of the heritage buildings we visited featured in The Dish, a movie about the CSIRO's Parks' radio telescope's role in the 1969 moon landing. While in Forbes, we visited the cemetery to view the final resting places of the infamous bushranger Ben Hall, whose life ended in a hail of bullets at nearby Gulgong Creek in 1865, his sister Kate Foster, who was drowned in the Forbes Lake in 1898, and Rebecca Shield, the great-grandniece of Captain Cook. It was interesting reading the headstones of people from many distant lands, convicts pardoned either conditionally or absolutely by the governor who'd made good, fortune seekers lured to the diggings, while others supplied the necessities of life to the hordes of prospectors that told the story of Forbes. Sadly, there are no monuments to mark the resting places of the early Chinese residents, who were also valuable members of the community. There are no graves or headstones to mark the bones of more than 150 souls that rest in the town's first cemetery, used from 1850 to 1861 on Red Hill Road. As we wandered along the Federation Heritage Trail through the central business district, we passed many buildings built before the 1900s, including the Forbes Post Office, built in 1881, the Town Hall in 1891, St John's Anglican Church, built in 1877, St Andrew's Presbyterian Church, also built in 1877, the Vandenberg Hotel, and many other buildings of significance. Like many of the towns Rick and I had passed through, Forbes was full of colonial architecture and steeped in gold rush history, including that of Australia's largest gold robbery at Escort Rock in 1862 by Ben Hall and Frank Gardner. There is so much history in these small rural towns. As we left Forbes, we were looking forward to viewing the CSIRO's Australian Telescope Compact Array, that is a world-leading instrument for radio astronomy and deep views into the universe, that consists of 6 22-metre dish antennas weighing 270 tonnes each, located on a 6-kilometre road and railway track to stimulate one very large antennae. From Forbes, we made our way along the Newell Highway to Parks. In December 1873, the town was officially named Parks in honour of Henry Parks, who had visited the area in August of that year. Sir Henry Parks played an instrumental role in the Federation of Australia. Like many towns in the area, Parks attracted significant attention during the gold rush of the 1870s onwards, and to this day modern mining companies have sites in the region. Agriculture is one of the primary industries in Parks region, particularly cropping, sheep and cattle farming. While in town, we checked out the Elvis sculpture in the park and the Henry Parks statue in the centre of town. Just out of Parks, we stopped at the CSIRO's Parks Observatory to check out the dish that helped broadcast the 1969 Apollo 11 moon landing. The 64-metre dish, the first fully steerable large antennae in the southern hemisphere, is an impressive structure, and while there we had the opportunity of seeing it being repositioned. The structure is still a world-leading scientific instrument and is operated 24 hours a day. Since its commissioning in 1961, Parkes Observatory has been responsible for many world firsts in radio astronomy. The large dish is very sensitive and is ideally suited to finding pulsars, rapidly spinning neutron stars the size of a small city. Radio astronomy allows us to interpret the cosmos in new ways and shape our understanding of the world around us. What an amazing opportunity Rick and I had. The astronomers at Parkes examine a wide range of radio energies from our galaxy and other parts of the universe. Objects such as pulsars, galaxies and quasars that broadcast enormous quantities of radio energy into space. From the observatory, we made our way along the Renshaw-McGirr Way to Wellington through Yeovil on the crossroads between Dubbo, Parkes and Wellington. Yeovil is surrounded by rich agricultural land known for its production of fine wool, wheat, orchards, canola, which we saw lots of, vineyards, beef cattle and fat lambs. Banjo Patterson spent his first 7 years on the family property near Yeovil. Nestled in the foothills of Mount Arthur Reserve, Wellington sits at the junction of the Bell and Macquarie rivers and was named after the Duke of Wellington, who defeated Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. Wellington is the second oldest settlement west of the Blue Mountains. During our stay in Wellington, we visited the Wellington Caves, where we discovered the wonders of Australia's prehistoric past. Rick and I took a guided tour through Cathedral Cave with its 15-metre tall crystal formation, and Garden Cave, full of delicate dripping stalactites and intricate cave corals. We were amazed by 400-million-year-old marine fossils and 100-million-year-old megafauna fossils. In the Ancient Landscapes Gallery, we interacted with ancient marine creatures and stood next to life-sized diprotodons. We wondered at the natural beauty of the caves as we ventured beneath the surface. Formed over millions of years, the limestone caves revealed an inspiring limestone and crystal formations with traces of marine life from millions of years ago, and are lined with beautiful stalagmites and stalactites formed by droplets of water redepositing limestone in the same spot over millions of years. Particular sections of the system are also incredibly rich in vertebrate bones that range from megafauna through to long-lived modern species. In the afternoon, Rick had taken the fossil trail that took him on a winding path that saw him looking for fossils and watching the native fauna and flora across the Katoomba Ranges. He also came across Anticline Cave that highlighted the amazing folds and formations that can be found in the caves. While Rick was busy wandering the fossil trail, I visited the small Japanese garden with its tranquil water feature and many birds. Our visit to the Wellington Cave was truly a unique and awe-inspiring insight into natural history. We leave the amazing natural history of the Wellington Caves and travel further along our journey to immerse ourselves in the history of the early inhabitants and pioneers with a visit to the Gulgong Museum. In its heyday, Gulgong was once described as the hub of the world. Today, it is an important centre and hub of a network of roads going north, south, east and west. Tom Saunders found gold on Red Hill in 1870, and so began the Gulgong Gold Rush. Gulgong has retained much of its Gold Rush appearance, with the streetscape lined with heritage buildings that haven't changed since the late 1800s. Many of the heritage-listed town buildings still retain the complete original verandas and iron lacework balconies, including the Prince of Wales Opera House, in which Dame Nellie Melba once performed. Its narrow streets are lined with high footpaths. From its early gold rush beginnings, Gulgong has become a thriving agriculture and commercial centre. The Gulgong Museum contains thousands of exhibits pertaining to natural history, Indigenous artefacts, agriculture, gold mining, business and civic affairs, and has hundreds of photographs of the pioneers and the gold miners who settled in the area. The exhibits include a comprehensive array of domestic tools and utensils, farm and mining equipment, horse-drawn vehicles, Aboriginal and geology artefacts, period clothing, and buildings dating from Gulgong's turbulent gold rush days of the 1870s. The museum was set up as a means of preserving the prosperity of a way of life and traditions, which has largely passed beyond our current everyday lifestyle. The difficulties and hardships under which the pioneers established settlement of the area can be more readily understood when we can see for ourselves the primitive tools with which they worked and the things they used in their everyday lives. The Gulgong Museum traces the history of the surrounding districts from the pioneering days through the roaring days of the gold rush to the present time. Some of the exhibits include a Victorian bedroom set in the 1880s, a sight and sound display containing a massive collection of radios, gramophones and projectors dedicated to the history of Australian cinematography and sound recordings, the old-time print shop with an old working print display showing all the old printing presses and linotypes dating back to the first newspaper printed in 1872, Gudgeon's cottage, the blacksmith's shop, a kitchen and a bakehouse, and a collection of restored horse-drawn conveyances, and an audio-visual theatre where we saw more of Gulgong's pioneering history. Rick and I thoroughly enjoyed our visit to the museum that could quite easily have turned into an all-day event, as we revisited how the men, women and children of yesteryear lived, worked and partook in life in the days gone by. On leaving Gulgong, we made our way along the Castlereagh Highway to Birrawa and made our camp in the reserve beside the Fire Brigade building, where we will leave you for this episode. I hope you have enjoyed watching. Join us next time as we continue our homeward journey. Cheers for now, Rick and Rosemary. R&R Live and Life.